Welcome back, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler. Thank you so much for speaking to your district, but you go beyond just your district. You're speaking to the state and to the nation, and we really appreciate that. You're so involved right now.
Well, thanks, Rose. Thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it, but please call me Guy.
I don't know. I'll work on that. You are my congressman, and I'm proud. So listen, let's talk. I want to get to opening PA, so we'll save that for later. That's our dessert. But right now, let's start talking about the China task force. Now, I know that there are several pillars to the task force. We've got national security, economy, energy, technology. You guys are really focused. And yet I heard, and you can tell me if this is true or not, that Nancy Pelosi is kind of like trying to delay the process or impede it in some way. Is that true?
Nancy Pelosi is. We were supposed to have a committee that was supposed to be stood up back in February. And Nancy Pelosi kept slow playing Leader McCarthy saying, yes, we'll get you the members, we'll get you the members. And then it never materialized. So Kevin McCarthy, months later, just said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and stand up a committee. If you want to send members on it, you can. But clearly, we have got to hold China accountable. Leader McCarthy was looking to do this before we even got hit with COVID-19. He was that forward thinking. So I'm glad we finally have this task force stood up. And this task force is made up of 15 members. And what we're going to do is we're going to not only act as almost a kind of think tank, but we're going to have bills and legislation that we're going to then introduce that's going to come from this committee. And sure, a lot of it might not pass this term, but next year, when we are in control and we take back the House, we are going to run these bills and they're going to be good. But there's several different subcommittees. I'm a co-chair on the National Security Subcommittee, and also I'm a co-chair on the subcommittee that's on economics. So I'm really excited to be included. I'm really happy with my subcommittee assignments, and we'll see where this leads. But we need to do something to hold China accountable, not only for COVID-19, but all their transgressions in terms of trade, in terms of theft of intellectual property, the actions they've taken that have been really hostile in the South China Sea. So this is going to be the first step at combating a rising, hostile, adversarial China.
You know, I'm glad to hear that, because that was going to be one of my next questions. Will we look into the negligence and their involvement in the spread of COVID-19, whereas there didn't necessarily need to be that grand of scale of spread throughout all the countries in this world? So I'm so glad to hear that you'll be focused on that as well.
Thanks. We are going to look into that. And I've already taken steps outside of being on this task force to get to the truth of what actually occurred. You know, Australia, the EU, a lot of other countries are starting to ask for an investigation. They're holding China accountable. And it might be time to look at sanctions on China. It might be time to divest away from China and make sure that our retirement accounts are not going to prop up the Chinese Communist Party. And it's time to take a look at that. It's also time to renegotiate some of these trade deals. We had deals going with China, and China has backtracked in a lot of it. They allowed COVID-19 to spread, and I can talk about that in their negligence. But it might be time to renegotiate those deals and then strengthen our economic ties with allies in the region like Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Australia. I was just on a call this week with the ambassador from India. It's time that we strengthen our relationship with India, because we've got to contain China, not only economically by making sure that we have bilateral trade agreements all over the Pacific, but militarily. China is expanding into what we, in the military, as you know, I was a former naval officer. They're transitioning to what's called a blue water navy. Now they have what we call a brown water navy, and that is to basically control the littoral waters around them and their coastline. A blue water navy is a navy that can actually project power beyond their own waters. They're ramping up to have 6 aircraft carriers in the Pacific. They're working to build artificial islands in the Spratlys. They are really taking an aggressive posture. So militarily, we've got to look at going to a 355 ship fleet. I'd like to see possibly another carrier strike group, because we've got to be on the defensive when it comes to the South China Sea. And we also have to make sure that we're meeting our obligations around the world. But Rose, that was a long-winded response. I apologize for it. And I
No.
just talked about COVID-19 and the World Health Organization. So I
Yeah.
wrote a letter to Secretary Esper, who's from the district. He's from southwestern Pennsylvania. And I wrote a letter asking how much DOD money actually went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We know that the DOD sent money to EcoHealth Alliance for the specific purpose of studying biological weapons of mass destruction. We also know that NIH and the DoD money that went to EcoHealth Alliance went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where in that P4 lab, they were studying biological weapons of mass destruction, specifically zoonotic diseases that come from bats. We also know that the coronavirus that was presented in patient 0, who coincidentally was just blocks away from lab 4, the P4 lab in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that he had the coronavirus, and the bats in the wet market did not have COVID. In fact, you would have to go 800 miles away from Wuhan to find the kind of coronavirus that occurred in bats. So there's a lot of questions that need answered. And if our money was going to fund the research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, then why did China not allow us into the facility at the start of this? Why did they not allow our doctors and our scientists into Wuhan? We could have helped, not only help stop this pandemic, but we could have seen what went on at Lab 4 and if there was a leak in Lab 4 that let this virus out. But if we weren't allowed in, were we getting any research? We were spending, I know the DoD sent EcoHealth Alliance something like $6.5 million. Did we get any research in return? These are just answers we need to know. And I'm also looking into the Department of Homeland Security to see if they were sending any money to EcoHealth Alliance and then ultimately the Institute of Virology in Wuhan.
Good. We're so glad to know that this is being investigated. This is so necessary. And I like that earlier you said when you take back the House, the Republicans, because I do believe Republicans will take back the House. And I do think that you'll have a lot more support and strength as we go forward. But
I agree. Thank you, Rose.
We mentioned Nancy Pelosi, and a lot of the blue state budgets are now under scrutiny. And we know that Nancy Pelosi is at $1 trillion she wants to send as a bailout to those states who were negligent in terms of spending and budgets. Is that really fair that our money should go to these states that behave poorly? And the only way for any of the other states to receive any kind of monies like that is if they were working in a negligent way where their spending and budget was concerned.
It's inherently unfair, Rose, that we would reward these states where you had these governors. They were acting as petty tyrants, shutting down the economy while failing to protect the most vulnerable. Why would we reward those governors and take money from the red states and send it to blue states to do things like bail out pension plans that have been failing for decades? That has nothing to do with COVID-19. Worse, if we do put it out there that we're going to bail out these states, then it incentivizes these petty tyrants and the unelected bureaucrats are in the health departments. It's just not at the state level. It's also I've seen horrible overreaches of power of our local governments too, where you have some petty tyrants in local government as well. Why would we incentivize their bad actions and incentivize them to continue to shut down the economy? It's unacceptable. What we need to do is we need to incentivize people to go back to work. I know last time I was on the call with you, or you were interviewing me, I had brought up the CARES Point 2 Act and all the bad things in it. One of the things that was so appalling was the unemployment compensation bonus of $600 a week would have been continued until January 2021. That would create a lag in our economy. And I've talked to a lot of business owners in the district. They're saying that they have to increase their pay to make up for that $600 a week. Yes. So and I don't want to begrudge anybody money. And that was, of course, you can make the argument that was needed in the early days, but not anymore. It's now time to get back to work. And the worst thing we can do is incentivize people to stay at home and not go back to their place of employment, because we need to reopen the economy. We need to get people back to work, and we need to make Pennsylvania in the United States a place to do business again. You don't do it with these kind of measures.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And let's talk about Pennsylvania. This was interesting. I got some news today that a lot of the labor unions right here in Southwestern PA, who were in the past somewhat supportive of Republicans, at this point they're saying, that's it, we're done with the Democrats, this is killing all of us, we need to get back to work. And now we're finding that a lot of these unions here on this part of the state, side of the state, are actually supporting Republicans, which is very good news, and it makes sense, doesn't it?
This is nothing. This is nothing new. Western Pennsylvania. You go around, you talk to someone who's in the carpenters union or is a laborer. You name a steam fitter. You name it. These guys want to work. And I realized this when I was a state senator. I was at a public hearing with the DEP regarding a pipeline, a natural gas pipeline that was coming through. And I spoke, a state representative spoke, and then the next was a union representative from the laborers. And I just assumed naively that he would speak in contradiction to what I had just said.
Right.
And no, he actually was on the same page as I was. So I talked to him afterward. He said, look, we just want to work. The far left Democrats are really shutting down the opportunities for us to have jobs in construction, in the oil and gas industry. We want to build things. We want to work. And these guys, this is different than a public sector union. Your guy that's out there working, he's only getting paid if he is working. And so we need to make Pennsylvania a place where you go back to work, where we build things, we have construction projects. And that's why the trade unions are coming over to the Republican Party, because we're the party of economic future. The Democrats want to solve everything with wish lists, like wind and solar subsidies that would cripple our natural gas industry and frankly kill jobs. They also want to send those payments, direct payments to illegal immigrants. You try telling a guy who's working for a living with his hands that his hard-earned tax dollars are going to go to provide taxpayer-funded health care to illegal immigrants while he's working for health care for his family. You tell him that the illegal immigrant that broke our laws that is here is now going to get direct payments just like he did, even though he's been paying into the tax base for years. This is inherently unfair, and trade union workers understand this, and that's why that they are now frankly our Republican base right now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something, I talked to, and for some reason, a lot of these business owners call me, but they know that I know you and others, and they don't know what else to do. We are at a place where there's so much frustration, almost hopelessness. Dentist office called me today. They cannot do cleanings. I mean, when you start thinking about how the long-term ramifications of these shutdowns, right? Gum disease, when we're talking about dental offices, hair salons still cannot open. I can get my dog groomed, but I can't get groomed. All right, I don't know how long I can keep this up. But
well, Rose, you still look great, though. I gotta say.
That was very kind. But the thing is, though, Congressman, these people are struggling, and they're being told now, the hair salons and nail salons, that they may not open even until July or beyond. Now, they cannot go much longer. Some of them couldn't make it this long, and they're done. It's just, my heart breaks for them.
Well, it's because we have these unelected bureaucrats that have never run a business,
right,
that have been working in government their entire lives. We have a governor whose greatest business achievement was inheriting a cabinet company from his parents, from his family, and then he passes it off as if he's some great businessman. It's time for these unelected bureaucrats and Governor Wolf to get out of the ivory tower and look at things as we look at things from the ground. Look, there's a way that we can have a return to normalcy in terms of economic activity, and we can still protect people. Great example is Ron DeSantis in Florida. I was in the JAG Corps with Ron DeSantis. I'm honored to have known him. I think a lot of them. But he took the step of not allowing people that had COVID-19 into his nursing homes. Juxtapose that with what Governor Wolf did. So while Governor Wolf was crushing our economy, he mandated that the nursing homes accept individuals that had COVID-19 that tested positive. Makes zero sense, and it caused literally thousands of deaths in Pennsylvania. 68% of our deaths came from nursing homes, and a lot of it is tied back to his decision to allow COVID-19 patients into our nursing homes in front of our most vulnerable people. At the same time, I might add, Secretary Levine, not elected by anybody, took her own mother out of the nursing home and put her in a hotel because she knew this was dangerous. Yet it was good enough for the rest of us, but not good enough for Dr. Levine's mother. So we were given a false choice. You heard the left say, If you want to reopen the economy, you don't care about human life.
Yes.
False choice. We could have protected human life by protecting our hospitals, our nursing homes, and those with compromised immune systems, and still let the rest of the economy function. So we were given this false choice. It's blowing back on the Democrats. And that's why states like Florida, you're seeing less deaths than in New York. You're seeing the same thing in Texas. So it's going to be interesting in the future. People like Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis, we should go back and use what they did as a blueprint for future pandemics. Instead, the media has lionized Governor Cuomo and Governor Wolf, yet has demonized these red state governors who actually made great decisions that save people's lives. And the matrix and the data as it comes out reinforces the fact that these red state governors did responsible things.
You know, you're so right. And DeSantis was on fire this week. I mean, he was just blasting the narrative from the left and saying, you know, all those doomsayers. And here it turns out, as you said, lower death, lower cases since they've been open. So, all right, as always, I always like to ask you if you have a word for those in particular in your district before we sign off.
Sure. I would just say, look, again, we're going to get through this. A virus cannot kill the American spirit, the American dream. We're going to emerge better than ever. And despite the fact that we have a governor that has taken a draconian approach, who's turned into a petty tyrant, even those actions cannot cripple our economy. The fundamentals are the same. And we've got a lot going for us in Western Pennsylvania. We've got an oil and gas sector that is going to bring us back better than ever. What we've got to focus on is reducing regulation, reducing taxation, and getting the people of Western Pennsylvania and all over America back to work. Because on the other side of this, our economy is going to be stronger than ever. Our position in the world is going to be stronger than ever because we are emerging as a choice to the world in opposition of China. So we are going to be elevated in terms of world standing. So we're going to get through this and we're going to be better than ever. And I'm really excited to see just how much of this growth comes to Western Pennsylvania.
I appreciate that. And I thank you so much, Congressman, for taking the time to speak to all of us. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Rose. Take care.